There are ways to calculate the changes in GDP. One of them is this, the CPI, the Consumer Price Index. The Consumer Price Index is like a grocery cart of all the stuff or of a bunch of products that somebody would buy and that the same households would buy every year. And so what the government did was they collected a grocery cart and they said, okay, in 1985, how much would somebody put in the cart for $100? And they found all the stuff that you would buy for $100. And then they said, okay, well then in 1986, how much would it cost to buy the same shopping cart? Right, maybe it was $102. And how much would it cost to buy the same shopping cart in 2020? Maybe it's $280 for the same stuff. So that if you want to compare prices between some year in the past and prices in today's terms, if you want to know how much, so gasoline costs $2 a gallon today, right? What would the equivalent of $2 a gallon have been back in 1985? You would take that $2 and you would divide it by the CPI for this year and multiply it by the CPI for the previous year, and you would get some different number. And I think this is like 38 cents or something close to that. So gasoline would have been 38 cents a gallon back then, and that would have been the same as paying $2 a gallon today. This is how we would be able to compare. Have the prices of gasoline gone up or down over time?
Down.
They actually, in many cases, have gone down.
Did it used to be like 80 cents?
Well, it depends on real terms. You have to correct for inflation, right? You have to correct for inflation. And you'd have to take measure of it. It's fluctuated, though, right? Now, if we were really running out of gasoline, what would happen to the price of gasoline? It'd be going up. But what's happening? We're finding more gasoline. And the cars that we have are using less of it than they used in the past. Okay, so the CPI is a measure. Now, it's called the Consumer Price Index. Why? Because it only captures the changes in prices of consumer goods. But it's not only consumers who are buying things. Who else buys things? Consumers buy things. Who else buys things? The government buys things. Who else buys things? Businesses. Investors. And also foreigners buy things that we make, and then we also buy things that foreigners make. This is the basic formula for calculating GDP. GDP is equal to the consumption of consumers, the expenditures of consumers, of investors, of the government, exports and imports. And we usually combine these two together and call it net exports. So we have just one symbol for all that. And then we replace GDP with Y. We just use Y as the symbol to talk about GDP, just so that we have a shorthand term for it. Similarly, we're just going to use pi to talk about inflation over time. And we're going to build a model where instead of price and quantity on the axes, we're going to talk about not just the quantity of a certain thing, but we're going to talk about the quantity of all the things. We're going to not talk about the price of a certain thing, but we're going to talk about the price rate, the rate of change of prices, or the inflation rate over time. And we'll build something that's similar to a supply and demand graph, but it's going to have an extra line on it, called long run aggregate supply. This is what we're aiming for. This is what the second half of the semester is about. Is building a model to think about what's happening in the economy, and how the government tries to intervene and other institutions try to intervene in the market to bring about any equilibrium.